Hi, everyone. Glad to see you all here this evening. Welcome to the library. We are pleased to have Brendan Nicole here today as part of the library's week-long focus on solar and space science. Brendan was born on Earth Day, raised in Northwest Arkansas, and graduated from Farmington High School in 2003. She then graduated from UCA with a degree in graphic design and photography with a minor in marketing in 2008. After almost 2 decades of being in fast-paced environments, she decided to pursue her passion of photography and mix it with her love for the outdoors. She became an ambassador in 2022 for Arkansas tourism and loves showing off what our state has to offer. Besides exploring Arkansas, she enjoys exploring hidden nooks and crannies of our diverse country while documenting the night skies along the way. Brendan, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn things over to her.
Hello, thank you guys for coming out tonight. Tonight we're going to go over just introduction to astrophotography and the effects of light pollution. Let's see, she kind of went over the introduction, so I'll just go ahead and skip over that and go to actually where I've gone. So I've actually gone on some extraordinary adventures. I have road tripped across 35 states, and I've hiked 1,300 miles to capture 450 waterfalls. I've also explored 95 state and national parks and forests, and I've lost too many nights' sleep to count, but each moment has ignited my passion for adventure and photography even more. So I also own and operate Brendan Nicole Photography, which is an adventure photography-based company focused on education and travel. I teach both local and out-of-state photography workshops geared towards capturing amazing landscapes, learning new long exposure techniques while taking epic adventures. Excuse me. All right, so when you're shooting the stars, where do you even start? So today we're going to go over the gear that you need, the necessary camera functions, what settings to use and how to focus at night, the alignment and movement of the Milky Way, the useful apps that help me plan a night under the stars, and where to go to see the stars, which also happens to be my why. What is astrophotography? It is the art and science of capturing images of celestial objects such as planets, stars, galaxies, and other deep sky objects. It involves using specialized techniques to take pictures of the stars that are millions of miles away. When you mix the night sky with a landscape image, it's called astro-landscape or nightscape photography. So there are several types of astrophotography that we can capture with our modern cameras. Some of the most popular are the Milky Way core and other nebulae. Astro-landscapes, and these two that we'll discuss more in depth today, but there's also star trails, twilight images, the moon, and meteor showers. I actually have a free Intro to Astro PDF that goes into more detail about the types listed in purple. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll take you straight to the shop and you can download it. So what is the Milky Way exactly? The Milky Way is a barred spiral galaxy that is home to our solar system and many other stars, planets, and celestial objects. It is called the Milky Way because it appears as a faint, milky band of light that can be seen stretching across the night sky. It is estimated to be about 100,000 light years in diameter and contain between 100 and 400 billion stars, as well as gas, dust, and dark matter in a spiral-like spinning pinwheel. Our visibility of the Milky Way is restricted to the nearest 1,000 to 2,000 light years away. Our solar system is located within one of the Milky Way spiral arms, about 25,000 light years from the galactic center. The Milky Way is part of a group of galaxies called the Local Group, which also includes the Andromeda Galaxy and several smaller galaxies. The Milky Way and the Local Group are part of an even larger structure called the Virgo Supercluster. The Milky Way has played a significant role in human history and mythology and continues to be a source of fascination of study for astronomers, scientists, and photographers. Studying the Milky Way and its many stars, planets, and other objects can help us better understand the universe and our place in it. So first topic we're going to go over is what gear you need to shoot the stars. So you are going to need a DSLR or mirrorless camera, a wide-angle lens that can open up to f2.8 at least, and lenses that I've personally used is the 14mm f2.8 by Rokinon, the Canon 16-35 f2.8, Canon 24-70 f2.8, Tamron 15-30 2.8, and the Canon 15-35 2.8. You're going to need a tripod. That QR code will take you to my favorite one that you can purchase online. It's not very expensive, but it has never failed me. You're going to need an intervalometer and a large, fast memory card. Okay. Why do we need these items specifically? So you need a camera that allows full manual control as well as focusing manually. An advanced camera is going to handle noise well at high ISOs. A fast lens is also necessary, so it allows wider apertures and lower ISOs. The Milky Way is not nearly as visible at f4 compared to f2.8. Tripods are a must. There's just no way possible to handhold for as long as we need our shutter speeds to be. An intervalometer is also handy when it comes to stacking, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They are also great to use as a shutter release so you don't shake your camera while you press the button. And most newer cameras have these built in. A large memory card is also super helpful because you'll be taking very long exposures in RAW format. It means large file sizes, so you're collecting a lot of data. So topic 2, in-camera and lens functions. So just be sure you're setting your camera to shoot in RAW format because you are collecting data. You do not want to have the camera take and compress the photo for you. So you will turn off both long exposure noise reduction and high ISO speed noise reduction. When you do noise reduction in camera, it can lead to losing signals from faint stars that'll be hidden in the noise. This camera perceives that tiny spots as noise, and noise reduction kills the detail in your image. It also increases the processor activity and causes the camera to heat up as well. And when you're shooting star trails, that processing time will cause gaps in your trails. So just know how to change your temperature to your white balance in camera to Kelvin because stars are typically shot at around 4,000 degrees Kelvin. This helps cool down the sky to a blue tone with white clouds and light pollution, but if your artistic preference is more of a black sky with warmer tones of light, you can always adjust that back to a warmer Kelvin degree or just put it in auto. And because you're shooting in RAW, you can also manipulate this with slider adjustments in Lightroom during post-processing. And also make sure to check your lens for image stabilization and turn it off. It's also called vibration compensation or VC. And so this should always be off when you're on a tripod. Otherwise, it actually causes shake while it tries to stabilize. Okay. Topic 3, the correct settings to capture the Milky Way. So first setting you're going to work with is your ISO. It is important because it determines the amount of light that reaches your camera's sensor. So when you increase the ISO, the cameras become more sensitive to light, allowing more light to be captured in a shorter amount of time. This is especially important when capturing deep sky objects like galaxies or nebulae, which can require long exposure times. But the downside, with increasing your ISO, it has negative effects on your final image. One of the most significant issues with increasing ISO is the introduction of noise or graininess. This is because the camera's sensor amplifies the light it receives, and as the ISO increases, so does the amount of noise introduced into the scene. This can result in a loss of detail and decrease in the overall quality of the final image. So is there a way to turn lights off? Might help a little with the pictures, but that's okay. Another issue with increasing your ISO in astrophotography is the impact it has on dynamic range. So the dynamic range refers to the range of brightness levels captured in an image from the darkest shadows to the brightest highlights. As your ISO increases, the dynamic range of the image decreases, which can result in lost detail in the highlights or shadows. And to mitigate the negative effects of increasing ISO, we will use a technique called stacking. So this involves taking multiple images at the same settings and then combining them into a single image using specialized software. Beginning Milky Way ISO settings, you're just going to want to be somewhere between 1600 and 6400. You're going to have to find a balance between capturing enough light and minimizing noise. And if you have a crop sensor camera, you're going to have a higher ISO because they do not allow as much light. And it's all going to depend on the ambient light you have too around you. Aperture is the next setting, and it's important because it determines the amount of light that enters the lens and affects the depth of field and sharpness of the final image. Just like the human eye, when we're in darker areas, our pupils dilate and our eyes widen to let in more light, yet what we see is not as sharp or detailed. Capturing as much light as possible is crucial to create a high-quality astro image. And by using a wider aperture, more light can reach the camera sensor, allowing for shorter exposure times and increased detail in the final image. This is especially important in astrophotography, which can require long exposure times to capture the faint details. But one of the significant issues is the reduction of the depth of field, which is the range of distance in the image that appears to be in focus. A wider aperture creates a shallower depth of field, which can result in a loss of detail in the foreground or background of the image. Another issue with a wider aperture is the impact it has on the sharpness of the final image. So when you use a wider aperture, the edge of the lens may become less sharp, resulting in a decrease in overall image quality. This is especially noticeable in the corners of the image with distortion and aberrations can occur, or coma on the stars. It turns them into little UFOs with the wide-angle distortion. So to help fight the negative effects of a wider aperture, we use a technique called stopping down or narrowing the aperture. It involves using a narrower aperture to increase depth of field and improve sharpness while still allowing enough light to reach the sensor. And the challenge with this technique is finding the balance between aperture and exposure time to capture enough light while maintaining sharpness and depth of field. But just for beginner Milky Way settings, f2.8, or just the widest your lens can go, but again, I always stop down to 3.2 to eliminate the coma on my stars. Shutter speed is the last actual in-camera setting. It's very important because it determines the amount of time that the shutter remains open, allowing light to reach the sensor. It determines how long before your lens eyeball blinks, and again, just like the human eye, when you're in low light, you're going to naturally stare a while just to see the scene come in focus. In astrophotography, the objects being photographed are often extremely faint, and capturing them requires as much light as possible. By using longer shutter speeds, more light can reach the sensor, allowing for increased detail. The downside, though, is using longer shutter speeds have negative effects on the final image, such as the introduction of motion blur. So as your shutter remains open for a longer period, any movement of the camera or even the subject being photographed is going to cause blur in the image. And this is especially noticeable in stars, which will look like streaks instead of pinpoints of light. Another issue with longer shutter speeds is the impact it has on noise or graininess. The longer the shutter remains open, the more heat the camera sensor generates, which can introduce noise into the image as well, and can result in a loss of detail and decrease in the overall quality of the final photo. To combat the negative effects of longer shutter speeds, astrophotographers use a technique called tracking. So this involves using a motorized mount or an astro tracker to track the movement of the stars as they move across the sky, allowing for longer shutter speeds. But beginner Milky Way speeds is somewhere between 15 and 30 seconds, and it depends on ambient light and light pollution, but a good rule that you can start with is the rule of 500, and you just take your focal length and divide it by 500. So if you're shooting at 20 millimeter, 500 divided by 20 is 25 seconds would be your shutter speed. So the next thing that you'll set on your lens is your focal length. And so you're going to want to set it to encompass enough of the foreground and the sky, because the more zoomed in you go, the faster your shutter speed's going to have to be to avoid seeing trails. So I usually always shoot at 18 millimeter because that helps me cut down on that wide angle distortion in the corners as well. When it comes to focusing on your lens, set it to manual focus and turn the focus ring to the infinity symbol. It's just a very small portion of your lens. And change the screen to live view, zoom into that sky portion, and just move that focus ring until they're twinkling dots of glitter. Or if you have the greatest cheat ever in your camera, it's called manual focus peaking. Just turn it on, and it turns everything in focus to red sparkles, and you can tell everything's in focus without having to fight it in the middle of the night. So now you just shoot, and then just check your image for focus and exposure, and adjust and fine-tune accordingly. So just a quick recap for Milky Way settings: ISO 1600 to 6400, aperture of 2.8 to 3.2, shutter speed 15 to 30 seconds, use the rule of 500 to figure it out, 15 to 20 millimeter, and focus to infinity. All right, so now we're going to talk about the alignment and movement of the Milky Way. So The Dark Horse Nebula and the core. So the Dark Horse Nebula, or the Great Dark Horse, sometimes called the Prancing Horse, is a large dark nebula that from the Earth's perspective obscures part of the upper bulge of the Milky Way. It is one of the largest groups of the dark nebula in the sky. The Dark Horse borders with the more famous constellations Scorpius and Sagittarius. This area of the Milky Way is what we usually want to capture. It's called the core. It's approximately 2.5 light years wide, and it's 1,500 light years away, and it shines at a magnitude of 6.8. And if you look closely, you can almost see a horse trotting on his back with his leg prancing. Can you see it? I don't have a laser pointer. But that's what we aim to shoot, is in the core, is that Dark Horse Nebula. So understanding how to set up a composition before you get on site is super important. The Milky Way core is moving constantly. It's not that we're spinning, so we're moving constantly, right? So just not throughout the night, but also in the months, everything's moving. So the Milky Way core has a season, and in the northern hemisphere, it's between late February to mid-October. And in the early season, around February, it's barely making its appearance in the southeastern sky just before blue hour, around 4 to 5 a.m., and it's going to be more parallel with the horizon, so it's going to look like a squished rainbow. And then for each passing month, it's going to rise an hour earlier than the previous month. So for March, you can go ahead and say it's about 3 to 4 a.m., April's 2 to 3, May 1 to 2, until this time where it's rising just right after the sunset at like 9 p.m. Also, for each passing month, it's going to be more vertical in its visibility time. So during the summer months, it's going to be nearly perfectly up and down. And it will also move across the southern sky a little more each passing month. So in February, it's more in the southeast, and by October, it's in the southwestern sky. And during the summer months, it's directly south. And you cannot photograph the core during certain lunar phases throughout the month. So if the moon is up during visibility hours, the larger it is, the less capable you are of seeing the Milky Way. So now I'm going to talk about just some useful apps that I use when I plan my astrophotography shots. So 2 of them I use. One is PhotoPills. It's free. And I use the Sun tool, the Depth of Field tool, the Spot Stars, and the Night AR. And Planet Pro, I think, is $9.99. And I use the Planner, the Viewfinder Virtual Reality, and the Dark Sky Ephemeris. So let's talk about PhotoPills just for a second. And then this is the Sun tool. It's great because you can pull it up and you can see at a quick glance your entire day. You can see the sunrise, the sunset, and every nautical moment throughout the day. So you can see blue hour, golden hour. Again, at night, you can see when twilight hits, when nighttime, when the galactic center rises. So all that at one very quick glance. The depth of field calculator is great. So you just put in your camera's information, like what make and model you're shooting with, the millimeter that you want to shoot at, along with the aperture, and approximately how far away your subject is, and it'll tell you your hyperfocal distance. And your hyperfocal distance is the distance beyond which all objects can be brought into acceptable focus. Night AR is another great feature that's helpful on site. So you just pull it up and you'll slide your finger across the screen to change the time, and it'll show you where the Milky Way will be at certain times while you're on site. Actually, that day it was right above my little bearded dragon. Spot Stars is another great tool in PhotoPills. So it gives you the correct shutter speed for shooting the stars. All you have to do is tell it the camera's model, focal length, and aperture. So we talked about that rule of 500, and we can just throw that right out the window. And this is why we stack our images, because if I was to take an image at 25 seconds and actually zoom in or print that large scale, you would still see trailing in the stars. So the only way to combat that is to shorten your shutter speed. So this is why we use the NPF rule. So you enter your camera's information, and it gives you a much more accurate reading, and it tells you you're only going to get about 5 seconds before those stars actually start to trail. So the exposure triangle says that if I need to shorten my shutter speed from 25 seconds to 5 seconds, I'm either going to have to open my f-stop, which is already as open as I'm going to get it, or I have to raise my ISO and introduce more noise. So I'm already open, so I have to raise my ISO. So this is why we stack, because when we stack, it eliminates the noise. So Planet Pro. This is probably my favorite app for planning. So it's best whenever you need to plan a composition ahead of time, and especially if you've never been there before. So it has 24 ephemeris features that can track everything from the sun, the moon, night photography, eclipses, time-lapse, rainbow position, tide height, and even satellites. So mine's pretty much always going to be on Milky Way Seeker. So it's going to tell me the elevation of the core. It's going to tell me how many days of a year that composition is possible. And it even has a virtual reality function that I can't even begin to tell you how spot on it is. So I actually was studying. I knew I was going to be there on July 6, 2021. I was making this in about April that year. I knew I needed to be on a northern shore shooting south. It was July. It was going to be straight up and down. Again, never been there before, so didn't even really know where I was going to be. So I just dropped a pin, and then I hit virtual reality, and then I knew, like, when I got on site, I could pull up my app, and I could just walk with it, like GPS, until I got to where I dropped that pin. And I knew, oh, I got to stand right here. So let me show you how spot on this is. So that was my plan that I had made back in, like, April before I ever got there, and then that's the shot I ended up getting in July. So I knew exactly where to go and stand, and I knew exactly what my picture was going to look like before, and I had never been there before. So that is one of the coolest functions of this app. It's worth every penny. So, and just for those who are wondering, that picture on the right is actually a blue hour blend. It's a 4-image focus stack blue hour blend. So I took 4 images at blue hour at f11, 30 seconds, ISO 100 at all different focal points throughout that image. And then I waited, I sat there for 4 hours, didn't move my camera, and then when the stars got in position, I took 25 images at 6 seconds at 3.2 at ISO 20,000, and then blended them all together in Photoshop. So, dark sky ephemeris. So this is just where you drop a pin wherever you want to be, and you scroll over to the dark sky option, and it's going to tell you the Bortle class of the sky. And I talk about that to get into this next topic, which is where to shoot and my why. So, dark skies are a must. They are crucial for astrophotography because they minimize light pollution, which is the unwanted and artificial light that can obscure the stars and other celestial objects in the night sky. When taking photos, any additional light source can greatly reduce the visibility of faint stars, nebulae, and other objects, as well as blow out the highlights in your image. The human eye has the ability to adjust to low light conditions and perceive faint details, but cameras have limitations. This means that we must take extra precautions to ensure that our equipment can capture as much light as possible from the stars and other celestial objects we want to capture. In areas with high levels of light pollution, like cities and suburban areas, the night sky is much brighter than it would be in a rural or remote location with minimal artificial lighting. This makes it more difficult to capture the full beauty and detail of the night sky, especially in astro landscapes where we incorporate the horizon. Therefore, finding a location with dark skies is essential for us to achieve the best possible result in our work. We can use the Bortle scale as a way to reference if a certain area is dark enough. The Bortle scale is a way of measuring the quality of night sky for a location, and there are 9 levels, which 9 being the most polluted. To shoot the Milky Way, you need to be in at least a class 4, so you can check the night sky quality in Planet Pro and just dark sky maps online. So my obsession with the night sky actually started with my papaw and one shooting star. We spent many evenings of my childhood on the front porch swing stargazing, and he would always see a shooting star and I would miss it. And I never saw a meteor until the night he passed away, and that one flying fireball would forever change the trajectory of my life. So every night that I go out to capture the heavens, I see a shooting star now, and I know that's my papaw telling me exactly where I'm supposed to be. It's pretty serendipitous that my first astrophotography image ever was a comet. I want everyone to be able to experience this magic of watching a meteor fall, but sadly, over 1/3 of humanity can't see the stars. So not only are dark night skies essential to the rhythm of life on our planet, but stargazing has also been proven to ease our minds and make us more compassionate towards others, which I think we can all agree. We probably need more compassion in today's society. So this is why light pollution is such an important topic to me. One of my goals is to bring awareness to light pollution, and it's slowly causing our dark skies to fade away. It is a topic that's rarely discussed when it comes to our health, and it's greatly affected us in nature and is a form of pollution that's grossly ignored by most people. There are only about half of the states in the country that actually have true dark skies. I want to advocate to not only our home state of Arkansas, but also the surrounding states, the dangers of light pollution to us and animals, and offer lighting options that would drastically cut down the pollution and energy waste and preserve the beauty and awe of our night skies. I'm not so much worried about AI taking my job as a photography teacher, because it can never replace giving pure experiences and capturing fleeting moments, but I am concerned with artificial lighting, or AL. Eventually, we will not even have a dark sky space so I can teach. And our ancestors experienced a night sky that inspired science, religion, philosophy, art, and literature. And now millions of youth across the globe will never know the wonders of the Milky Way. So what is light pollution? This is actually a dark sky map of our country, and you can see there is a huge line of demarcation. Everything to the east is grossly light polluted, and you can see why all astrophotographers go west when it's Milky Way season, because it's dark there. So light pollution is the inappropriate or excessive use of artificial light that's harmful to wildlife, humans, and our climate. But unlike a lot of other types of pollution, it's totally reversible and has solutions that are easy to implement, and the results are immediate and lasting. Light pollution not only disrupts our view of the night sky, but also has significant and often detrimental impacts on various species of plants and wildlife. Both plants and animals depend on Earth's daily light and dark cycle for reproduction, nourishment, sleep, and protection from predators. Birds, particularly migratory species, are highly impacted by light pollution. Many of them rely on light cues for navigation during migration, and artificial light from buildings, towers, and urban areas can disorient them, leading to collisions with structures or exhaustion due to circling light sources. Additionally, artificial light at night can disrupt their natural sleep patterns and affect their behavior and their health. Sea turtles are also known for their incredible journeys across the ocean to lay their eggs on beaches, and unfortunately, light pollution can lead the hatchling turtles astray. Instead of heading towards the ocean, they may be drawn towards artificial lights and often resulting in their death from exhaustion, predation, or traffic accidents. Furthermore, artificial lights along nesting beaches can deter adult females from nesting and impact the overall survival of these creatures. Amphibians such as frogs are also highly sensitive to light, and light pollution can disrupt their natural behavior. For many frog species, including those that are nocturnal, excessive artificial light can interfere with their breeding and feeding patterns. It can also make them more vulnerable to predation as they become more visible to predators. This disruption to frog populations can have cascading effects on ecosystems because they play a crucial role in controlling insect populations. It also has indirect yet profound effects on coral reefs. So artificial light from coastal development and ships can disrupt the natural behaviors of marine organisms, particularly those that rely on moonlight for reproduction and navigation. This can lead to coral spawning events occurring at the wrong time, reducing the chances of successful reproduction. Additionally, increased algal growth due to artificial light can smother the coral reefs and harm their fragile ecosystems. For billions of years, life has evolved with Earth's light and dark rhythm. It's even encoded in the DNA of all plants and animals. Life learned to operate under the natural night sky glow under the stars or moon. The night signifies when to eat, sleep, hunt, or migrate for many animals. And so we as humans have disrupted this by lighting up the night. And brighter light does not always mean a safer environment, and the pursuit of excessive brightness often leads to unintended negative consequences. Poor lighting creates a false sense of security while allowing criminals to hide in harsher shadows. The biggest misconception and most common belief of brighter lights is that it creates better visibility and therefore enhanced safety. But like having overly bright streetlights in urban areas aimed at deterring crime or improving road safety, but there are negative consequences. Blinding glare from excessive bright lights can actually reduce visibility and make it harder to see. It creates shadows in dark areas, just providing better hiding spots, as you can see here. It can also create issues while driving, which can cause harsh glare on windshields, making it harder to see pedestrians at night. As much as 50% of outdoor lighting is actually wasted, which increases greenhouse gas emissions, contributes to climate change, and renders us more energy dependent. In the U.S. alone, about 15 million tons of CO2 are emitted annually to power residential outdoor lighting alone. This equals the emissions of around 3 million vehicles a day. To offset that carbon dioxide, we need to plant about 600 million trees annually. And not only that, about $3 billion of energy is wasted to bad lighting each year. Tucson saved $2.2 million in 2018 alone just by upgrading its street lights, and it also reduced its light pollution by 7%. Even just leaving lights on at night in the office building wastes energy and adds to the sky glow of the city. Being dark sky friendly does not mean no light at all. It just means using the most efficient light and only when it's needed, because there are over 1,000 dark sky certified lighting fixtures on the market, so it takes a very small change to save energy, money, and our night skies. Studies also suggest that artificial light at night negatively affects human health by increasing our risk for obesity, sleep disorders, depression, diabetes, breast cancer, and more. According to National Geographic, I quote, "Light pollution is affecting human health, wildlife behavior, and our ability to observe stars and other celestial objects. It can wreak havoc on our natural body rhythms in both humans and animals. Nocturnal light interrupts sleep and confuses the circadian rhythm in nearly all living organisms." One of these processes is the production of the hormone melatonin, which is released when it's dark and inhibited when there's light present. An increased amount of light at night lowers melatonin production, which results in sleep deprivation, fatigue, headaches, stress, anxiety, and other health problems. Recent studies also show a connection between reduced melatonin levels and cancer. In fact, new scientific discoveries about the health effects of artificial light have convinced the American Medical Association to support efforts to control light pollution and conduct research on the potential risk of exposure at night. So what can you guys do? What can the community do to help? Behind you is a bunch of free resources on pamphlets on what can be done. And you as an individual can install exterior lighting only when and where it's needed. Shield your lights, they shine down to decrease sky glow. Lights should be no brighter than necessary. Install timers, dimmers, and sensors on lights, and use warm colors to limit the use of blue light. You can also donate directly to the IDA, which is the International Dark Sky Association, or I even have a Patreon account set up to help with advocacy. As a community, we can help advocate and adopt citywide lighting regulations and change street lights to more efficient lighting methods, turn off commercial lights when they're not needed, advocate to join the IDA as a community, and we can work with the local government to keep light on the grounds and our skies natural. And ultimately, I think it'd be really cool if we as a community could come together to organize a yearly blackout event to where we could stand in the middle of the town and stargaze together. So what has astrophotography given back to me? It's diminished my sense of fear of the night. I have reconnected with nature. My problems feel infinitesimal compared to the entire universe. It has pushed me to my limits and forced me to expand astronomically. I have learned to slow down and run on celestial time. And in conclusion, every night under the stars will undoubtedly become an adventure you will always remember. You'll never be bored with photography once you learn how to shoot during every hour. The person that you choose to be your night shooting partner, it will be your best friend. You can never pack enough headlamps, extra batteries, or memory cards. Astrophotography will take you to the most amazing places, and it will start up your wanderlust every February. You will learn how to sleep wherever and whenever while waiting for the stars to align. And because your eyesight's actually hindered, your other senses will kick into hyperdrive. You're never going to regret a night of missed sleep for the stars, but you will regret sleeping in on a clear moonless night. And what will scare you the most at night are undoubtedly armadillos. Always. 100%. And just so you know, I do weekly downtown photo walks that leave from the library every Wednesday. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can come join tomorrow. We'll be doing one. And then, thank you guys so much. And here's all my contact information. I have Instagram, Facebook, and also a private workshop on private group on Facebook, Photo Workshops with Brent and Nicole. That'll get you access to discount codes and special offers and new news. So, thank you guys. Any questions? Easy crowd. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Yes, Eric.
Of your national parks you've been to, what's your favorite one for Astro?
Oh, Astro? Great Sand Dunes.
Yeah.
Great Sand Dunes for sure. It's a beast. It's a challenge all in itself. I tried to go one time and scout it and climbed up to High Dune, and then that night I was like, I don't want to go back out there. I don't want to go do that again. That was terrible, but I did it. But yeah, no, I love the Great Sand Dunes, and I like it because you can go out there and be completely alone. You can have the whole park to yourself at night, and that's the only place I found you can do that. So yeah.
You ever done any of that in Yellowstone?
No, I've never been to Yellowstone. God, it's one of the 35 states I've not been to. I know. Colorado stops me every time. I can't get past Colorado. I'm just like, okay, I'll stay here for a second. So, but no, it's on the list. It is on the list.
Do you use any scopes, spotting scopes, telescopes, binoculars, anything to?
My light bar on my truck if I get there too late, and that's about it. No, you know, a lot of times I shoot a lot of wide angle, so it's very much trying to encompass as much as I can. It's more about finding a really beautiful landscape and just accenting it with the Milky Way versus just going out and just getting the Milky Way. So that's why light pollution is so, because a lot of the deep space astrophotographers, they can just go in their backyard, right, in the middle of town, and they can take their telescope and shoot and be like, look what I got from my backyard. And I'm like, great. But because I have to incorporate the horizon, I have to get away from the light pollution. Otherwise, I don't see the stars at all. So. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, guys. And I've got some free resources back here. Feel free to come grab brochures or whatever.